All right, let's do this. Hello, 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 and welcome to the very first Kid Writes interview. We have our guest today, Brandy Alexander. Brandy, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hi, my name is Brandy Alexander, and I am from Texas, born and raised Texas girl. And I'm here on the show today to talk about my very first opportunity to have a novel. I dreamt of it my whole life, and I finally got to see my dreams come to fruition, and I published my very first novel this year. So I'm excited to tell everybody about it, trying to get word out there so that I can continue with this and have an entire series at some point in time.
All right. When did you start writing this? Like how long ago?
This first book I began probably about 6 years ago. The idea first came to me, and it took a little while for me to get it started. My life got in the way. I'm a school teacher, so it takes up a great deal of my time, and I had young kids. But finally, there came a point in my life where I had a few months where I wasn't overwhelmed, and I began to write. And once I started, it just flowed. It went really quickly. I went from I think I was on probably around chapter 5 or chapter 8, and within 2 months I completed it.
Nice.
So yeah, it was like a chapter a day. I'd sit down and write for 8 hours and just knock them out. And I hesitate to use the word easy, but it was just fun. It came to me and it flowed, and it was like I couldn't write fast enough to keep up with what was coming out of my brain. So I found that now my dream is to retire from teaching and write full time. I would love to just travel and be like, this book I wrote in Barbados, and this book I wrote when I was in Jamaica, or wherever I am at. That would be the dream.
Yes, very much. So this book I didn't see. Was this self-published, or did you find a publishing house?
Well, it was sort of a merge of both. I worked with Fulton. Fulton Books is my publisher for Genesis, and they do assist me a lot along the way. And I think I was really, really welcoming that, because I'd never done this before. It was my first time. I would very, very much love to find an agent, somebody who would get behind this book and help me. I need the guidance, and I would appreciate that anywhere I could find it. Starting off, as a school teacher, I don't have a lot of money. So promotional work and marketing work is a struggle, especially when you don't know yet where to put your money. Well, where the wisest places are. So right now, that would be something I would love for maybe the sequel, which I just completed this summer. And it'll take a while to get it through the editing phases, but I'm really excited about having 2 books out there, and I don't want to stop. I just want to keep writing.
What's the title of the sequel, just out of curiosity?
I've actually not released that yet. I've been hesitating because I've gone back and forth between multiple titles. I'm hopefully will have something set in stone soon. And once I do, I will release the title for it. The sequel picks up about a year after this book ends, and continues on with their story.
All right. No, I've read the books. I'm just processing some of what the potential of that.
Right. Well, it's about a year later. As a matter of fact, it is, because they're celebrating 1 year together. And I'm
trying to avoid too many of the spoilers here. That's
right. I don't want to overdo it. But yeah, it picks up, and they end up realizing that there is some of the events that happened in the first book are starting to revisit, and they've got to figure out what's going on. The difference between, I think, the first book and the second book is that I've actually introduced a new element. I've got some witches, both good guy Wiccans and bad guy witches. And so it sort of shows that it depends on who you are. Just because somebody studies different elements of the world and different, that they may worship or find peace in different, that there's nothing wrong with that I think everything is combined, that we're all connected. And I don't know, like I said, I've got the good guys and I've got the bad guys, and both of them are showing a different point of view coming from the element of magic. My books, although they are fiction and all of this is based on fictional ideas and premises, I also feel like there's a great deal of the book that comes from the point of view of, could this really happen to some extent? The angels around us, the demons that are around us, spirits that surround us. How much of that is real and how much of that is fictional? And I think in my books, I sort of merge that world between the two. And so I hope that it gets people to really thinking about their own beliefs and their own faith and the world around them.
That actually brings up to one of the points on the outline. I'm going to skip around here a little bit. You've mentioned being very, very inspired by the writings of Frank Peretti, who is obviously very Christian centered. Like that's the way he sees the world. I'd say, not to be rude, but he's a little bit intimidated by some of the Wiccan stuff, some of the alternative religion stuff. So how would you say, what would you say you take from Frank Peretti's writing, and what would you say you try and avoid from his writing?
Growing up, I was raised in a very Christian home, and my own faith is very, very strong. But I enjoyed reading books that were always supernatural. I think I felt that I got too much of the real world. I didn't want to sit down and read a book about the real world. I wanted to read something that was going to take me outside this world. And so whether it was vampires or witches or ghosts or demons or werewolves, whatever it might be, I found joy in that. And so as I began to want to write myself, the first person that opened my eyes to wanting to write my own book was Frank Peretti. He had written, these amazing stories that I had never read before. And I think it was the first time I'd read a book that wasn't linear, that didn't just go event 1, event 2, event 3, event 4. He would introduce a new character and you wouldn't have no clue who this person was until chapters later. It was intriguing. And that was the first time I realized that I wanted to one day write a book that would make people feel the way I felt throughout that entire process. Keep me on my toes, make me wonder what's going to happen, have no idea what the ending is going to be like. And it wasn't until my father passed away that I began to think about the other world a little bit more, about what it would be like to talk to a ghost, to talk to the other side, how the angels and demons interplay in our life. And so I think it took my inspiration from Peretti, and then I interwove it into my own story, my own characters. Peretti doesn't use ghost in his stories, and so that was a new element. And I think I took mine to a different place slightly. There is definitely inspiration taking for him, but I wanted to take a whole different ride, a whole different storyline, so that it would be unique, something that nobody's ever read before. And that's been one of the greatest comments that I've had from people who have read it, telling me that they didn't know how it was going to end, that they had to just keep going because they had no clue. And I find that a huge compliment.
All right. So your story does feature a lot of ghosts. You have a very very unique kind of ghosts in your story. Can you talk a little bit about that? Like, where did the idea for how your ghosts interact with the main character, for example, did that just kind of spring into your head, or was that?
It did in some aspects. I remember it was, I was laying in bed one night and I couldn't go to sleep. And so when I can't sleep, oftentimes I will write a story in my head and it'll either put me to sleep or sometimes it'll wake me up more. But this was one of those nights where it woke me up more. And I had this idea come into my head first of somebody who could talk to spirits. And like I said, I'd been playing with that thought process in my head because I had lost my father not too long back. And I had my son about a year later. And so there was actually a moment when my son was very young where he used to talk to nobody, about the age of 1 to 2, too early for, make-believe friends.
Yeah, my kids do that all the time.
He would stop and look up and then wait for like somebody was speaking, and then he would answer them and nod his head yes and point to stuff, looking up at them. And so it was always kind of odd. And then one day my mother was holding him and pointed to a photo of my father on the wall and said something about this being Papa. And he stopped her. He was almost 2. And he said, "No, that's Pop Pop." She's like, "Well, what do you mean that's not?" He's like, no, it's Pop Pop. She says, "Well, how do you know?" He goes, "He told me." And so, yeah, that moment was very surreal. And I think that might have been the beginning of that thought process of the ghosts coming back and intermingling and talking to us. And so, again, I wanted a story nobody had ever thought of before. So I began to think about what I hadn't read, stories that I hadn't, what would keep my curiosity to the end. And I wanted something that was very powerful, very epic, save the world, where your heart just races towards the finale. And like I said, started off the thoughts of my father talking to my son. And from there, my ghost began to develop. And the main character, of course, in the beginning of the book, he saves he almost drowns, and his brother saves his life. But in so doing, his brother loses his life. And so when he wakes from his coma, he can still see his brother. And that's the beginning of his life. For a while, he's plagued by ghosts. In my stories, they can possess anybody who is able to see them and take control. And so he realizes that Wayne's basically his best friend. He's the only one that can see the other ghosts, that can keep him from getting possessed. And he sets out on a what's what I'm looking for? He sets out on a mission to figure out a way to stop this from happening. And in so doing, ends up realizing that God's got more in store for him, got some plans for him to be able to use what's happened to him for the better good, for for whatever the purposes are that God's got in line. He needed these characters to be where they were at. And you start to see how God works in our lives, how he has plans for us. And these ghosts actually are part of that. I think that's what makes it different, is because you actually start to fall in love with these ghosts, to become very personable. They're real people in an aspect and in a way. And they're just as much a part of the book, as part of the story, as the main character is.
Yeah, I particularly love the scene where Tex tries to make coffee for everybody, but because he's a ghost, he spills it everywhere. It's very funnily written. Funnily.
Yeah, thank you very much. He thinks he's done awesome.
Side note, why is funnily one of those words that is absolutely a real world word and just doesn't sound like it?
What word?
Funnily.
Suddenly?
Funnily.
Funnily. Oh, okay, yes. That's funny.
I digress. Yeah, but you don't just have ghosts. This is also, you've got angels and demons in here. So what, obviously there was Frank Peretti in there. What other inspirations did you draw on for how you wrote demons?
In my mind, growing up in a Christian home, I attended church all the time. I was very aware of the idea of angels and demons in this world. And over time, we've watched all these movies coming out, and these films, and you see all these different people's, different creators' ideas of demons. And I think in my mind, they sort of coalesced into my own version of what it might be like, what they might look like. You also found out more in the sequel that I just finished writing, about how the demons became the demons. The fact that, they were at one point in time angels, and when they turned their back on God, they, let sin in, and the sin overtook them and created them. One of my favorite parts, I think, when I wrote this book, was the first time we see the demons at that meeting deep in that valley in the Colorado Mountains, in the Rockies. The fact that how they're being looked at almost like beetles crawling over each other, all these exoskeletons, the clicking, and the gray skeletal facial features, and the gnarled bones and gnarled wings. I really enjoyed writing them. It felt creepy and dark, but at the same time, there was so much to describe. As a writer, one of the ways that I personally see what I'm writing is almost like I'm watching a movie. So you can see this camera, and as it swoops down into the valley, what you would be seeing on the TV screen, what you'd be seeing in a movie. And so I used that sort of method as I wrote. I had a friend of mine who had read the book just recently, and she texted me in the middle of the night that she was reading the part about the demons, and her cat got under her bed and made a bunch of noises, and it scared her. And And I thought that was like the best compliment, because she was obviously so engaged into the story itself that a noise in the room freaked her out. So yeah, the demons are the darkest part of the book, but they're also, I think, the most fun to write sometimes.
All right. Wow, my brain just went completely blank there for a second. Okay. Well, I have ADHD, so these can be fun sometimes.
That's all right.
That's
right. I do the same thing. You begin to think about something for just a split second, and then you can't remember what you were originally thinking about.
Exactly. Like, no, it's horrible. So nope, it's gone forever.
Gone forever. It'll probably pop back up in a few minutes when you're talking about something else.
It absolutely will. Either that or it'll pop up like 3 hours later when I'm not even interviewing you at all. Like, should have asked that.
Right.
So in terms of trying to write something scary, because it's October, we should talk about horror a little bit. So in terms of trying to write something scary, because you've very much written, for the most part, your ghosts as relatively friendly, whereas you've tried to write your demons scary, where they're both fairly prototypical horror tropes and horror characters. So how do you find that balance
between the good guy ghosts, basically, you're saying, and the demons that are portrayed in there?
Yeah.
I think that if we were able to interact with ghosts the way they are in the book, there would be ghosts that were good, that were here on Earth, that were not in any way evil or had malice. But in the second book, in the sequel, there's actually is a ghost that we find out is working for the demonic side. So there would be a sort of, I guess, the idea that the ghosts aren't necessarily always going to be good guys. The demons, on the other hand, I think that's why I enjoyed writing them so much, because they were the complete opposite of the good guy. I mean, you can't get much more evil than pure evil, than something that was born of it, that came from it, that creates it and strives to create it. So I wanted to make them almost as dark as I could get them, as creepy and malevolent, and so filled with hatred and selfishness that they can't even hardly get along amongst themselves. And the descriptions that I give them sometimes, though, I think that's the best part of the book, because when you read that, you have to hate the bad guy. You gotta really hate the bad guy in a book, because if you don't, when you get to the end, there's no sense in getting to the end. You want to feel that moment of retribution, of vengeance, or that the bad guy has it. And when you create a character, or a bunch of characters in this case, that you really want to see stop, that you want to see the end of, I think that makes the climax that much more important, that much more exciting. So yeah, I really wanted to make these demons as dark as I could create them, because I wanted that feeling of triumph at the end.
And with your ghosts, you do have a couple scenes where you're explaining some of the drawbacks to Clay's power, where he actually winds up getting possessed, and they're really unsettling. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yes. All right. So in my book, there's a lot of flashbacks. There's, what's going on today. You also see, how he met different ghosts that have come into his life. The 3 ghosts that live with him is his brother Wayne, and then there's Tex, the old cowboy, and then there's also another character with them. His name is Gage, but he goes by the nickname of Buzz. And he himself was a CIA agent, at one point, a Navy SEAL in his life, so he's very well trained. And the rules in my book basically apply that if you are a medium and you can see the world around you, and a ghost tries to possess you, they can take over your brain. They can take control, because only one can be in control at a time, and you shut down. Whereas anyone who is not a medium, somebody who can't see the ghost world, they would remain in control. They can't see that there's a ghost out there trying to possess them, where if the ghost possesses them, they can taste or they can feel whatever that person is feeling, but they can't control them. So there's a lot of fear that Clay, the main character, is going to get taken over at any point in his life. So his brother stays with him in order to stop that. Well, one of the flashbacks has him around the age of 16, and it's the first time he becomes possessed. He doesn't really understand what's happening when it is happening. But there's a ghost who is aware that he can possess a medium and take control. And he's obsessed with getting a hold of somebody from his former life. So that scene where he is struggling to catch up to Clay, and Clay's running for his life, basically. And, this ghost gets a hold of him and possesses him. The fear is also that, if a ghost has been gone for a while, they may not even think to breathe any longer because they don't need to in their own existence. And so, he tries to get the ghost out and can't. He's not in control. And his brother happens to see what's going on and becomes, he saves him. That scene, though, which is the first time we see why he is afraid, why he doesn't want to be able to see that world anymore. It plays a big part in the book because that's what sort of sets the momentum for him to end up finding the cure for what he's after, for lack of a better word. I don't want to give away too much of the book, but he finds something that he thinks is going to relieve him of his second sight. And although it does not do that, it gives him the ability to control his world, to relieve the fear that he lives with. So I like the fact that he sort of has this extra power, this extra little thing that makes him very special amongst other mediums.
All right. So do you have any word of advice to any aspiring writers out there? Anybody still trying to finish their first book?
Keep going, don't quit. I know a lot of people say that, but it really happens way too often. You get started on something and you've got great ideals, you've got great plans, and then life gets taken over. You're too tired. You need to carve out something, some kind of time, 1 day a week, 1 hour a day, whatever it might be, for yourself. And if part of what you would want for yourself is to finish a novel, then 1 hour a day may be all you get. But think about it, at the end of the week, you've got 7 hours. You could write an entire chapter that way. And if you wrote a chapter a week, it still wouldn't take you but a year, year and a half, if that's what it took you. But you would complete it. Just don't stop. Find that time for yourself and put your heart into it. Don't let anybody stop that.
And where can people find your book?
Anywhere books are sold. They have it on sale at Amazon. You can get it in the hardback. You can get it in paperback, and you can also buy it for your Kindle. But you also can find it anywhere at all online. You can get it at Walmart. You can get it at Target. You can get it at Barnes & Noble, Goodreads, Discover, anywhere you personally like to check out your books. So the Kindle version or the online version, ebook, they have it on Apple Tunes and iTunes. On Apple. I don't know. I can't think of anywhere actually that it's not being sold right now. So hopefully they would look for it. And if they want to reach me, they can find me at brandyalexanderbooks.com. I have all my links there. If anybody would like to go and leave me a message, I would love that. And I would very much appreciate if anybody who wants to take a look at the book and check it out would leave me a review. Very, very much appreciate that.
All right. And I am Michael Kidd. If you'd like to see some of my writing, I have an ongoing story to celebrate Halloween on Kindle Vella. It's called Divided. Feel free to go check that out right now, or you can pop over to my Patreon, where I write stories about a cowboy wizard if you're just really, really tired of reading spooky things, which also don't tell me about because I love spooky things. And always feel free to check out my website, kidwrites.com. Thank you so much for being with us, Brandy.
I appreciate it. It was fun. Thank you so very much.
Not a problem. And if you like this video, be sure to like and subscribe so you can see some of my upcoming videos with more horror creators. And please go out, buy Genesis, give it a review, and let us know what you think about it. Bye.
Bye.